Hey everyone, my name is Michael Anthony Adams. I'm a journalist and filmmaker here at ABC 10. Today, or actually tonight, I am joined by John Cabrera, a former homicide detective sergeant with Sacramento Police Department, and a current, this is the wonderful world of television. We have a little technical difficulty here, so I got to turn this down. Anyways, so moving on, and then we also have Pat Higgins, who is a current cold case detective with the Sacramento Police Department. Tonight we're going to be talking about a cold case, a 28-year-old cold case, the brutal murder of the Jacobs family. So to help you kind of understand a little bit about the case, we're going to show you a quick clip to catch you up to speed.
During my 15 years working homicides, I came in contact with a lot of ruthless killers, serial killers, and a lot of big cases.
There were two cases that stuck with me during my 36 years, East Area Rapist, and this is the other case that I would like to see answers to and finished while I'm still around.
A friend called me up and asked me if I'd heard about it, and I was just absolutely, it sickened me.
We got the call that bodies had been found inside of a house. It was a man and a woman and a child, and all of them were dead.
It's hard to even understand it, to fathom it, to put your head around it. It's just, it's horrific. Somebody knows something, okay? You think you can hide, but you won't. You won't. Watch out, they're coming for you too.
Thanks everybody for taking a look at that. So right now I want to get right into it with John and Pat here. So John, why don't you have me tell me just a little bit about your background so the folks at home can get to know you a little bit better.
Well, I'm a 30-year veteran of the Sacramento Police Department. I retired in 2002. And half of my career I spent working as a homicide detective. And I found it very rewarding for the work that I was doing. But I retired and then I went back to work a little bit for the department. I was able to work in cold case, being able to follow up actually on this particular case in the mid-2000s. So it was somewhat fruitful, and now that I'm glad that Pat is working on it, because I was hoping that that's what was going to happen in this case.
It's something you both share in common. I mean, Pat, you started off in homicide too, and now you've come back as a cold case investigator. Kind of introduce yourself and kind of tell us about your background.
So my name is Pat Higgins. I've been working homicide since 2003. I retired in 2015, and they offered to let me come back, and I work cold cases. And so I come back, I work the cold cases, and that's about it. With this case is one of probably the most notorious ones we have.
Yeah. John, you were actually at the scene the day that you got the call, and you were one of the first investigators to show up at the Jacobs house. What was that like for you?
Well, it was, I've had many call-outs like that before, but the circumstances here was a little bit different because I had learned that it was a man and a woman, but also a child. And right away, that's a very disturbing situation. Is like, how did this child, what does the person play in this whole crime? And so I anticipated that I would be able to see that and kind of figure out what was going on here. But then I realized this wasn't an ordinary type of, if it was a home invasion or whatever, this wasn't an ordinary type of crime that I would be rolling out to. This one had a child involved. And so, I'll always remember that. And so the anticipation of seeing the crime scene and seeing the victims, that's something that always stuck with me.
Pat, detectives that have taken a look at this case, and it's been a lot of them, they all mention Jenny. They all mention a photo of the little girl and seeing her, just treated so brutally. How, when children are involved, how does that affect you as an investigator?
Well, I mean, it's just, they're so innocent, and there's no reason to kill a child. I mean, not much less to kill anybody, but particularly a child. And that photo is how I first saw it is when I first got some information on this case. I think it was about 2010. I went pulled out the cold case binders, and like you saw them yesterday. There's a lot of them, and that one of the photo fell out of her and the little doll, and so that's like seared in my memory forever. I mean, it still just makes the hairs on my arms stand up whenever I think about it. I talk about it, and just it's something you never forget.
John, why is it so important that these cold cases are investigated or are still looked at?
Well, you got to remember, behind these victims are family members, people that are hoping for some resolve, hoping that something's going to come about to solve this case, to find out why. What was the purpose? Why would they kill this family, including the child? And so, we have to remember those family members, and, the department is dedicated to that. These cases aren't just put away and you never look at them again. That's not how it works. The department continually works on these cases when new information comes about. So we're always working. Like I said, I worked cold case for a few years, and then Pat came in and take over. So it never ends. I was there, I was gone, and then other people take over. But it's a continual chain of investigation because these cases must be addressed and they must be somehow solved.
If you're just now joining us, I'm sitting here with Pat Higgins and John Cabrera. We're talking about the 1991 brutal triple murder of a Land Park family. One of the things about this case, too, is that, we have the victims, Mick, Marcy, and Jenny, but then there's also another possible victim in this case. Can you talk a little bit about that, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a possible victim. I mean, there's Ricky McCarthy hasn't been seen since before this crime. He's presumed dead, and probably by the same suspects. The whole reason that we believe the Jacobs family was killed was because they were holding a safe that Ricky had put at their house. So it's not a coincidence that Ricky goes missing and presumed dead, and then they come over, and the whole target of this crime is the safe, Ricky's safe.
Let's talk a little bit about that safe. John, you were there in the garage that day where Mick's body was found. That safe was open. What did you see inside that safe? And what have been some of the theories about what was in the safe and taken from it?
Well, I can tell you that without having to describe anything in there, I can tell there was just a few articles that were in there. But other than that, there wasn't really much. And so, it was obvious the safe was open, that there was something in there, but we just had to continually find out what exactly was it that was taken. But, I remember looking in there and seeing it. And then we would go from there and try to figure out what was it in there, which we would eventually, find out.
What I thought was interesting, John, was there was valuable stuff left in the safe.
Correct.
So it wasn't like your typical home invasion where they come and take everything of value. Instead, in this case, they took certain items and left other items of value that, in my experience, most people don't leave behind some of the stuff they left behind. I mean, they're valued commodities in the criminal element.
Why would they leave behind some of these valuable items? What would be the purpose?
Well, my opinion was looking at the items and seeing that they kind of picked certain things that some of the items could have been tracked. Some of them could have been traced. Some of them could have been a description or might have led back to them. So they were looking at things that might have in some way, been able to track it back if they had it or tried to sell it or give it to somebody. Somebody might be able to track that back to where it came from. Or
there was just so much of what they came for that there was no need for this miscellaneous stuff,
Right.
If you're going for the big haul and you got the big haul, you're not going to worry about, it's like if you go to a bank, when somebody goes to a bank and robs a bank, they're asking for the ones and fives. And that's kind of what something like this is whatever they got out of the safe was so big that they weren't concerned with the nut stuff normal criminals would be concerned with.
Right. They weren't going to sit around and kind of debate what they were going to take. They went in there and took what they needed to do, and then they got out. And that's how it worked. Get in, get out. So it wasn't like debating over what they were going to take and not take. And as Pat said, they probably took what was the big haul and left everything else because it really didn't matter.
Yeah, and the rest of the house doesn't show. What I've seen in the photos and stuff is it wasn't like they ransacked the rest of the house, like when you come home and your house is burglarized. They've gone through. They went for one specific thing, Ricky's safe and the contents of that safe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly it.
So we know the motive, but the house wasn't broken into. Like you said, this wasn't a home invasion. The front door wasn't busted down. They got what they wanted out of the safe. Why kill the family?
Well, it's always been my opinion because I worked a similar case. And the reason in that particular case, which was solved, is that everybody knew who the perpetrators were. And when you think about this, even including the 9-year-old child, it was always my opinion that even she could identify one or more of the assailants. And so there was nothing else to do for them but to annihilate the entire family.
It's been 28 years. The case is still cold.
Well, I got to disagree on that. I mean, it's
Okay.
very warm.
Very warm.
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Because we've had some, like I said, we started working it real hard this summer. We had a whole task force basically working it, and we developed some very strong leads. I mean, there's a person of interest. Absolutely. And that's probably what we want most is there are people out there who have information about that person of interest, and they can help solve this case. Even if they don't know something about this particular case, past behavior by this person, past acts, can be very helpful to help and put them into this case. Is because we can show a pattern of activity, and it's well known in the world that these people operate on at least one of the suspects, if not more, is. And there's people out there that know it and have chosen not to tell us information.
So if you're just now joining us once again, my name is Michael Anthony Adams. I'm a journalist here at ABC 10. This is John Cabrera, a former detective sergeant with the Sacramento Police Department, and also Pat Higgins, who is a current cold case investigator for the Sacramento Police Department. We are getting some questions in. If you do have questions for either of these gentlemen, please just write to us on Facebook. We're watching as they're coming in. But we do have a question right here. It says, it was publicized there was interest in an old model VW in a black truck with a silver toolbox in the back. Have you identified, or were you able to identify the owner of those vehicles?
Not definitively, but one of the people of interest is linked to a similar car.
John?
Yeah, he is. We were able to find information and actually take one of the vehicles, and we had some statements from witness could tie the vehicle to the one individual.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said earlier about that this case isn't cold anymore. It's warming up. But why do cases go cold?
It just depends. I mean, a lot of times you run out of leads at the time, and then new technology comes out, new people come forward, people have different motives, their friendship groups change, all sorts of different things. And sometimes it's just, resources is, that new cases come in. And as much as you want to work that, you get a new case come in that has more promising leads. So there's always a little bit of a triage going on, which cases have the most promising lead to get somebody arrested on.
Right. And I'd found that, like in this particular case, one of the hopes that I'd had in many other cases, that when I found that there was more than one assailant, that was kind of a good thing, because then I knew if there's one or more perpetrators, what I found is that eventually they're going to start talking, and they'll talk with other people. And that's why, I agree with Pat, people out there know and have heard something. They know something and have information. And maybe in the beginning they let it roll off their back, but now they need to really, ask themselves, is this information, regardless of how they might think that it's really nothing, call in, get the information, because it's obvious that there's other people out there that have information that might have been talked to, maybe in a conversation. And this is something that generally happens when you have more than one assailant. They start talking, and they start talking to people, and that grows and grows and grows. And that's what, I would think that people out there have information. And that's what I'm hoping, and I know that's what Pat's hoping, is that people out there know. And for me to think that someone would sit on this kind of information where this 9-year-old child was murdered brutally, that's just beyond, my thinking, is that people that have information should call. This was a horrible, horrible murder, at the house. And if people out there have information, they're not calling in, I wouldn't know why. And they should just do it and call in and give the information. So, that's what I would think, and that's what I would hope. And Pat's, forwarding this cold case.
Yeah. And if you are watching right now, we will put that number up for you. If you have any information that can lead to the arrest and conviction of one of the suspects in this case, please do not hesitate to call Pat Higgins, who is the lead investigator, cold case investigator on this case. Pat, there was a reward that was presented over the summer. How did that change? Did it change the case?
Well, it really brought it to the forefront. I mean, we worked with the Department of Justice, and they devoted a ton of resources for us that really helped us to work this case and get us the momentum we needed. And that was one of the things, is they were able to, with the governor's office, to authorize this reward. Because $50,000, you would hope that on a case of this basis that somebody wouldn't need it, but you never know. People are motivated by different things. So you have a $50,000 reward, but more importantly, it got the media interested in the story again. Is it, because people had kind of fallen off the radar, and now this $50,000 reward, the Attorney General had a press conference, talked about it. It hit nationwide news, and that's the most important thing. The reward itself is important, but the publicity we got from it, the people started realizing about this case.
Many of the people involved, in this whole story, in this brutal story, are from the Lawrence Park neighborhood. I've had a chance to sit down with a couple of them, and I see Rebecca Myers. Rebecca has been really helpful in connecting me with people from that neighborhood. Kathy Buller, I see, is commenting here too. Thank you guys for your questions. Rebecca brings up a good point. We've been talking about the suspects, and she asked person or persons. We've established, I think, that there was more than one person involved, but why do we think that?
Well, going back to the investigation, because of what was going on at the crime scene at the time, we were able to deduct that it wasn't just one person that was carrying on and then leaving the other victims in the house. So there was more than one person.
Yeah, I absolutely concur. There's ample physical evidence tying more than one person. Besides, you have the MO of how it went down and how things were separated, but there's also physical evidence of more than one person.
And I'm getting word that we do have that phone number. We can put it up on the screen right now. The phone number is up on the screen. If you do have any information, please call Pat Higgins at the Sacramento Police Department. One of the reasons that we're doing this story is to bring attention to this case. For both of you, this question might be for both of you. What role does the media play, in helping to solve cold cases?
The media's involvement is paramount in any case, especially when it deals in homicide. But in this particular case, it's huge. Getting out there, getting the information, bringing this case back up to the surface, letting people know about it, talking about the family, getting people starting thinking about if they had heard something or if they knew of anybody that might have been involved, that'll start bringing it to their forefront, their thinking, and then maybe call in and give some information. But yeah, the media's role in any of these types of cases is without question big.
Absolutely. I mean, in this case, just since June, I've got more phone calls than we had in the last 10 years that I know of, or 15 years since I've been in homicide. And that's one thing I want to tell people is, if I don't leave a message, I will call you back. I never ignore a phone call. It's just sometimes I'm busy, and it may take a few days or a week to get you a call back, but I will call you back. They can also email me, too. And the email, I can just give you, or you want me to just say it? Or
Yeah, I mean, we can. Let's do it. Let's just say
So
it.
it's-
Everybody get your pen and pencils, or if you're on Facebook, just type it into your web browser.
So it's T Higgins, T as in Tom, Higgins, Higgins, at sacpd.org. And they can, that way is, if I'm not near my phone, I check my email more than my voicemail when I'm not at the office.
I'm going to type this into so it's T Higgins at sacpd.org. I'm going to type it into the comments section so you all have it here. Let's see. Okay. There we go. Okay. So, what has been the most challenging part about solving or trying to solve this case?
Well, I think historically it was just getting people to come forward and talk about it. Back then it was still fresh. I think now is, people are fearful, of the people involved. And I think one of the biggest things is this new law.
Let's talk about that a little bit. SB 1437. If people don't know what that is, I mean, It's just a couple letters and 4 numbers. But what does that mean? What is SB 1437?
It presents a dramatic departure in the prosecution of murders in this state. It's absolutely changes the whole prosecution of murders, because now we have to be able to prove somebody is a major participant in a homicide. And so I have people, if I can put, before you go in, if the 3 of us go in and do a home invasion and you shoot somebody, we're all responsible for the murder. We're all in there together doing the crime. Now is I have to show that the shooter's the major participant, and the 2 other people, if I can't prove that they're major participants, they get nothing. They get a home invasion, or in this case, because of the statute of limitations, they'd get nothing.
So
they would,
what's the statute of limitations on a robbery?
3 years.
3 years. So they couldn't even be charged for that.
They can't be charged for robbery. And so that's, the statute of limitations is basically, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure on most things, 3 years for most felonies, 6 years if the felony has a punishment of 8 years or more, or there's no statute of limitations if there's a life part of it. So, but in this case is being able to prove anything on that, a murder.
That they were a major participant in it.
Yeah, and so that, if there's a getaway driver outside, the law, this brand new law just came in January 1st, so it's still being parsed on what is a major participant? Is a getaway driver a major participant, or the 3 of us in there? And we don't know what the courts are going to say, so they're not going to be likely to be charged when we can't figure out what's a major participant. And there's some different things on it, but the old law was, pretty clear that it was a felony murder. If you go in and commit a violent felony, that you're responsible for the acts of your co-participants. And
so especially in this case, I mean, when you have more than one participant, and if one didn't pull the trigger but was in there in the house when this brutal act was taking place, I mean, they couldn't go down for the kill because they didn't.
Like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but that's a major challenge for us. It's a major dramatic departure in the prosecution of murders in this state.
And in the past, when it was the old rule, if you were there, you were being charged, and that was great, because if somebody didn't participate, but they were going to be charged with murder, it really, in some instances, caused them. They spoke up. They just said, "Wait a minute, I may not have shot somebody, and I'm not going to take the fall for it." And in some cases, I found that they would get a lesser plea if they turned the information, against the other 2 or 3 or whoever it is.
Yeah.
But this new law that Pat was talking about, when I heard about it, I was appalled, because it gives a get out of jail free card for people that participated in a murder or a murder robbery or a home invasion where people are killed. If you didn't pull the trigger, it literally gives these people a pass. Maybe a lesser, but they're not charged with the crime. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, as a former homicide detective, I just think, why would the state of California do something like that? That is just, to me, appalling, that to take that away from those that plan these things. And in this particular case, in this homicide that Pat's currently working, there's no doubt in my mind, they planned this. They knew what they were going to do. All of them, whoever's involved, they planned it to the T, and then they followed through with it. And to think that some of these people wouldn't be charged, it's just unbelievable.
What has stuck with you the most from this case? I know, you're retired now, you're out in the links enjoying a game of golf, but you can't work a job like this and not think about anything that you worked in the past.
I think about the family, and when I was working, and then after I retired and I went back to work, I would still run into the family members and try to convey to them, how much more we were working on it. But the frustration is, and I know it's for them, and that's trying to get this solved. There's no doubt that the people that are involved in this crime, this is a nefarious group of people. And that's, like Pat had mentioned, nobody is saying anything because they're a little scared. And now it's been brought back to light again. And so this isn't your ordinary little nickel and dime criminal. These people are hardcore people. And the people that have the information are generally sitting on it because then, like Pat had mentioned, they're afraid. But what we're hoping is that they're going to break away from that and think about what happened here, and then start giving information. Call Pat, give information, in hopes.
And if they're afraid, they can call. There's ways to keep their name out of it. Maybe not permanently, but for a very long time. And, is an anonymous call is better than no call. So they can always call anonymously and give me the information. But these people need to be held accountable.
Any final thoughts? What would you say if the person or persons involved are watching this Facebook Live? What's your message to them?
Well, I've talked with Pat, and I know where this case is going, and all I would like to say is that you may be sleeping, you sleep every night, but wait for a knock on your door, because it's going to come sooner or later. Somebody's going to address this on your doorstep, and it's always been with me. You can run, but you'll never hide on this case. And regardless of what you think, and I know Pat has information, and this case has been forwarded. And as he said, it's very warm. And so, those that are out there that even might know or that are watching and might know who's involved, it's coming. And it's going to be coming their way, and it's going to be coming like a freight train. And so, just be mindful of that.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining out there on Facebook us tonight. Both, thank you, Pat. Thank you, John, for taking the time to just kind of talk about the case and some of the issues and concerns surrounding it. Tonight on the LNT at 11 o'clock, we have a story, the second part of our series, Real Monsters. It's episode 2. This episode's really going to kind of dive deep into the crime itself, and you'll hear more from John and Pat in later episodes as well. Gentlemen, thank you both so much. And remember, please call Pat Higgins at the Sacramento Police Department. The number's on the screen right now. Call him if you have any information. They're just looking for answers.